And you will have to write a thank you note to taxpayers for that at some point. Joining us now to discuss some of the controversies which are also happening in today's public school system, we are joined by attorney Reese Everson, who is the founder of the Blush Project Foundation, and Professor John Ellis, who is the author of The Breakdown of Higher Education, How It Happened, the Damage It Does, and What Can Be Done. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Scotty.
Thank you for having me on.
Professor, let's start with you, because I always go to professors first. Maybe it's because I sat in the front row as a kid. You know, we often hear about this criticism of a radical political ideology. But is that more than just talking points? What does that actually mean in regards to what is being taught in our school system? And who are the ones who are actually responsible for putting it in?
Well, no, it is a reality. I mean, the whole higher education system of the country has placed it as its first priority, not real education, training people's minds, giving them a knowledge of the history and the society that they live in, but instead the promotion of a radical ideology, radical political ideology. Now, no one ever gave them permission to do that. As a matter of fact, the statutes of most colleges and universities prohibit the use of the campus for a political purpose. And the founders of those documents, I mean, the writers of those documents that founded state universities understood very well that if you let universities have political purposes, you will eventually destroy them. Because a political purpose is a fixed and rigid thing, but academic learning has got to be free and open. It's got to go wherever the argument leads. If you make a political purpose the first priority of campuses that should be devoted to higher education, what you do is you shut down higher education.
Well, and that's the question I want to throw over to you, Reese. You know, one specific that's come up into the headlines lately is this idea of critical race theory, and it's really going into the lower education, especially in public schools. I have to ask you, why do we need any curriculum crafted with opinion and emotion one way or the other? Shouldn't the reality, both the good and the bad, of past history be enough of a lesson of what is good and bad for society in the future? Shouldn't our lesson come from the reality that we've already faced?
So here's why it's so important to have these lessons in the classroom. What we're creating, and contrary to what the professor says, we're not creating a new political framework. What we're actually trying to do is teach civics and and history and allow students to understand exactly what America has done and what the truth of that is, rather than the propaganda, rather than allowing kids to continue to play cops and Indians and to think that, the
Cowboys and Indians.
Cowboys and Indians, and allow the students or children to think, oh, the Cowboys were automatically good and the Indians were automatically negative. No, what we're doing is we're bringing to attention the realities of history so that they can make proper decisions and so that they can interact with their peers in a way that creates a better America. That's what we're calling forth in our children, the best that they have to offer, instead of allowing them to operate with blinders on and being unaware of things like the privileges that exist, of the racism that has existed in our country.
Well, and Professor, I want your response to that, because it is starting in the elementary schools going all the way up to higher education, where in the past it was really in college that I felt like that was. ABCs were in the elementary schools. Now you're seeing them start at a younger age. The good and the bad of that, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, if you're going to have a curriculum for the schools, you want to have it based on settled knowledge. Settled knowledge that's based on a consensus of knowledgeable people. Now, critical race theory is basically backed by a fringe sect. It's not settled consensus knowledge at all. Secondly, you don't want a curriculum in the schools to be politicized. That's to say, you don't want something that is partisan, that is backed by one political party and opposed by another. And critical race theory is partisan. And the third thing you don't want in a curriculum is something that sets one race against another. And that, again, is what critical race theory does. But the basic problem with critical race theory is that it doesn't recognize that times have changed. 200 years ago, pretty well everyone was racist. Now, what critical race theory wants to do is to hold people of European descent responsible for their racism of 200 years ago. But what it doesn't recognize is that it's really about the time in which that was happening. Right. Everyone was racist 200 years ago. That's to say, everyone thought tribally. Now, right. Fortunately, we've developed beyond that. What critical race theory wants is to hold people of children of European descent responsible for the racist of the past, but doesn't hold anybody else responsible.
Professor, I want to get Reese in here real quick before we go, because we've only got about 30 seconds left. Real quick, Reese, your response.
It's not critical race theory that divides people into groups. It merely documents the racism that has been implemented by America since the very beginning of it in its Constitution, which deemed people who look like me 3/5 human being, and has carried it out religiously since then. Racism is so deeply ingrained into America that to criticize it for a lot of people becomes something that's fringe and anti-American. Right. And that's not about a political issue. That's about facing the truth.
Reese, Professor, I think this is a conversation that our classrooms are having. I'm glad that you joined me today for the same thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And